David Tweed, who's just interviewed the Italian Economic Development Minister, Corrado Passera. David, Passera announcing measures last week designed to boost growth and free up around 80 billion euros in resources. How does he intend to find that money without adding to already high levels of government debt?
Yeah, the announcement that they're going to free up as much as 80 billion euros, as you say there, that's an estimate of 80 billion euros. They're looking to raise about half of that money from what they call project bonds. Now, these are bonds that would be issued to fund specific infrastructure projects, and Passera seemed pretty optimistic that the Italian model could go even further.
That's why we're pushing on European project bonds and why we're pushing on a even stronger role being played by the European Investment Bank. For sure, we have to accelerate infrastructure projects, for example, at the European level. And these kind of financial instruments can make these objective more feasible.
Pretty much jibes with what Francois Hollande is also talking about, wanting to increase the role of the European Investment Bank, and that's why we're looking to get some sort of announcement at the end of next week on a capital increase for the EIB.
David, Passera was the boss of Intesa Sanpaolo for, nearly a decade. What's his take on what happens next in this move towards a banking union?
His view, Guy, it's fairly simple. The fact that you've got 27 different banking regulators and systems really going on within the European Union basically makes the whole banking system inefficient.
I support the single market also in the banking world. Today we have 27 different markets with different rules, different supervisors, and this is a strategic weakness by Europe vis-à-vis the rest of the world. If we want to have only local champions without the synergies coming from real European banks, we lose an opportunity to play other roles. So single market is the direction.
So, Guy, you were talking about the summit which is going to take place here in Rome tomorrow with Merkel and the three other European leaders. All of these subjects will be discussed at that summit: banking union and really eventually this pathway towards political union in order to put that architecture in place to stabilize the euro. At least that's the plan.
The most important thing is the stress test, and then we'll see what are the next steps to make the capital injection that's required. I'm going to explain the conclusions of both reports and discuss the steps that have to be taken, because this process starts now and has to be concluded within the next few days.
Well, our Europe editor, David Tweed, is in the Italian capital ahead of those key talks. So, David, you were speaking with the Economic Development Minister. Now, what did he have to tell you?
Well, look, this is Corrado Passera. He was put into charge of, as you say, economic development, a very important ministry when you consider that Italy hasn't barely grown over the last 10 years or so. He was put there as part of the technocratic government formed by Mario Monti late last year. Now, one of the things that a lot of people are talking about here in Rome at the moment are the comments that came out last night from Silvio Berlusconi, the former Prime Minister of Italy, who said that it shouldn't be blasphemy to think about Italy perhaps leaving the euro. So I put that question to Mr. Passera just to see his response.
Not helpful at all. It's a proposal that has nothing to do with common sense. And I'm totally against, and we are totally against any hypothesis of Italy leaving the euro. Euro is our currency, will remain the currency of Europe, is a strong currency, and we should not convey any kind of message against this certainty of ours.
Oh, so clearly you can see what the point of view of the Italian government is, that they certainly want to stay in the euro. I think Mr. Berlusconi must be a little bit of a thorn in their side, given that he's still leading one of the biggest parties in Parliament, Manus.
those kind of noises probably don't help anybody. But Passera was the chief executive of Intesa Sanpaolo. So I'm curious, what was his view on this banking union, David?
Yeah, we talked about banking union actually, and I thought it was quite interesting given the fact he also has a role as economic development, because he made the point that if Europe can get together and have some sort of banking union, that actually could promote economic growth.
I support the single market also in the banking world. Today we have 27 different markets with different rules, different supervisors, and this is a strategic weakness by Europe vis-à-vis the rest of the world. If we want to have only local champions without the synergies coming from real European banks, we lose an opportunity to play other roles. So single market is the direction.
Manis, the context of Mr. Passera's comments on banking union all come given the fact that we have tomorrow here in Rome that meeting, the mini summit that you've been speaking about. I'll be back to talk a little bit more about what we can expect from that summit, but as Mr. Passera said in his comments to me, it's really all leading to political union. It's just a question of how fast.
Minister, last week you announced the growth proposals we've been waiting for, which you claim is going to free up as much as 80 billion euros. Now that number's been met with some skepticism by the Italian press. How do you think you're going to achieve that figure?
Now, we made an estimate of some of the possible impacts of some of the measures. Since we introduced new project bonds, for example, or a number of new instruments for non-listed companies to collect money on the market, we made the estimate that probably something in the round of 30 or 40 billion euros might be the effect on that side. So not that much a figure, but certainly a material one. On the other side, a number of incentives, for example, tax rebates for building renovation, a new set of fiscal incentives to speed up infrastructure projects, a number of investments in the energy sector, in the city development projects, on the school development projects, and in the energy area probably might trigger investments and resources in the economy in the around of 30-40 billion.
So it's really an estimate, probably might. It does sound really like this is a best estimate, a best guess really for
Let's say that we provide a number of instruments to the economy as a whole, to specific industries, and from the industries we collect this kind of estimates. So it's a way to say that many industries in this country have appreciated these measures and expect material effect from all those decisions.
Tell me just a little bit more about the project bonds. That's something which has already been introduced by the Italian government, I think, back at the end of last year.
Yes.
What has been the reception for those project bonds in the marketplace? How do they work?
Project bond is a bond that puts the project itself in the position to finance itself. So it provides a further instruments to development companies and to companies involved in big infrastructure projects to have another instrument to fund the projects. What we have added with this decree is a fiscal treatment that makes these project bonds even more attractive for private investors, because the level of taxes on it is at the same level of government bonds.
The level of the taxes on the interest
Yes.
on the bonds?
Yes.
And the bonds then, do you see these bonds as being a model that could be adopted European-wide?
Yes, and that's why we're pushing on European project bonds, and why we're pushing on a even stronger role being played by the European Investment Bank. For sure, we have to accelerate infrastructure projects, for example, at the European level. And these kind of financial instruments can make these objective more feasible.
Without actually adding to the sovereign debt of individual nations?
Yes. Indirectly, obviously, the European Investment Bank is an instrument owned by all the countries, but through this instrument we get the most with the lowest level of national risk.
Should the European Investment Bank also get more capital?
Yes.
How much?
It depends on how courageous we are to speed up the infrastructure, the pan-European strategic infrastructure projects.
What's a courageous number?
I mean, we have the 10 corridors, for example. If we decide that we can anticipate of some years the implementation of them, that might mean several dozens billions more in the next few years. But without anticipating what our government will discuss in the next few days, I do believe we should be very courageous if we are very serious about growth and triggering a new phase of growth in Europe.
How many jobs do you expect your growth measures that you announced to create?
Difficult to say, and probably impossible, because we have such a wide range of measures. For example, the Chapter 11 we introduced for better managing the company crisis. How many jobs? Who knows? But for sure, if we guarantee a larger number of companies to survive economic crisis, that would be helpful. We introduce an interesting tax incentive to hire top talents in the scientific world, PhD people or a master in scientific country. Maybe only a few thousands in that case, but very important. And probably this is a way that will invert the tendency to lose these people, while we will be able to attract more of them. For sure, the tax rebate on building renovation will develop several 100,000 small projects around the country, and that would mean many jobs. The speeding up of the infrastructure projects, as you know, we have already financed in the first few months of this government 27 billion worth of projects, and we want to double this amount during the rest of the year. Again, we're talking about several 100,000 jobs, direct.
But these are jobs that would be created over the medium to longer term?
No, because all these projects are projects that have already been launched, and in many cases we simply accelerate projects that are already underway. So to a large extent, the immediate effect is material. You can estimate that in the round of 20% per year is the amount actually spent out of the money I mentioned before. So very significant amounts of money.
I just want to quickly look at the growth forecasts. The government's looking at a 1.5% contraction this year. Do you think that contraction is still too optimistic?
Is still reasonable. We all know, we all knew. That's one of the reasons why this government was appointed a few months ago. We all knew that 2012 would have been a difficult year from an economic point of view, from an employment point of view. We have to speed up the exit from this situation, and all the measures we are introducing month after month in the growth agenda, as we call it, will probably make the recession period a bit shorter than expected.
So does that mean that we can infer that you are going to be able to avoid having to increase the VAT in September?
That's something we want to achieve through a spending review exercise that is underway. We took the commitment to go through this spending review exercise, a major one, in order to compensate what was expected through the VAT increase with spending reductions. And we will start with expenses at the center level in order to give the example to the rest of public authorities that will have to participate in this exercise afterwards.
Just returning to the question of job creation, the labour market reforms, you hope to put them to Parliament before the EU summit at the end of next week, actually.
Yes.
Once again, even the Italian Industry Association has criticised these reforms, saying that they don't go far enough to actually kickstart the creation of jobs here. How do you respond to that? That we have done quite a good step in the right direction. Probably we created too much expectations at the beginning. If 7 months ago we would have said we want to reach the results we actually achieved, that would have been a very positive proposal. Actually, we have done quite a good job in terms of rationalizing social amortizers, for example, introducing active policies to recreate jobs. We certainly introduced a major change in the rules that regulate the exit from the job. That was a very delicate issue. For sure, we have introduced a number of reasonable things in terms of entry flexibility. Probably there is room for some more improvement, and in that respect, I understand the Entrepreneurs Association expects something more. But through the Parliament, the bill has been improved, and probably, as everybody is saying, there is room for even some more improvement, but it is an important step in the right direction. But what about of the structural reforms that have been undertaken by this government, the labour market reform? You've announced your growth measures. Is that it for this government? What other reforms, what other structural reforms do you undertake?
The major one, the one that proved that this country is very serious about the job we have to do, it was the pension reform. At the beginning of our commitment, we introduced, with the support of the Parliament, of the trade unions, of the Entrepreneurial Association, a very strong pension reform, one of the strongest in Europe. Certainly today Italy has one of the most viable and sustainable pension system, something even more than expected. Then we introduced, for example, a fiscal reform for companies. We devoted almost 14 billion to companies that increase their equity, that increase their size, because the size of Italian companies is a structural weakness we have to cope with. And one of the first structural reform was exactly that one. With the last decree, we reform the Chapter 11, the word. We reform the mechanism for non-listed companies to collect money from the market, and that's only the beginning. For example, we have introduced, and this is very important, a number of transparency rules in the public administration and the way public administration spend their money that will be a very effective way to reduce wastage and to make public spending more smart.
But as you've introduced these reforms, we still see yields on Italian debt rising again. It doesn't seem like the message is getting through to the market.
No, you must never forget that something is happening also around Italy, and the way the European issues have been managed or mismanaged certainly have an effect on it. We are doing what we were supposed to do, and we even accelerated in the implementation of a number of measures. For sure, today we have the combined effect of 10 years of non-growth, 2 recessions, one into the other, the European governance not providing the best results. The effect of the very strong discipline measures we introduced to make sure our public accounts will be in balance. And we will be one of the very few countries with public accounts totally in balance. So the combination of that obviously make this very moment a bit difficult to manage, but the agenda for growth is being realized. The accounts are under control. So we are doing what can be done internally. Now we have to help and to work with the other European partners to deliver at the European level what Europeans are waiting for.
But when you talk about the mismanagement of the crisis, what jumps out to you specifically as the biggest area of mismanagement?
I mean, we are Europe, and we have to take this collective responsibility to manage the problems we have in Europe. For sure, we have not managed properly a relatively small problem, the Greek one. It is less than 3% of the European GDP and less than 4% of the European debt. And probably we cannot say we have been very good, because we have put ourselves in a corner due to a problem that is not a massive one. So this is undisputable. But a number of very important things have been done in the last months, and I'm very positive about what Europe can deliver in the next months. We certainly agreed on a number of rules, the fiscal compact rules, that make very sure that at least a number of countries will comply with a number of rules that will make collective responsibility and management much more easy.
I want to come back to that. I just want to ask, just to return to
Yes.
Italy and this government's agenda.
Please.
Looking at that agenda, you mentioned the reforms that have been put into place. What can we expect from the government in terms of further structural reforms before the elections of next year?
We will keep going. I didn't mention all the very deep structural reforms we are introducing in the infrastructure world. Infrastructure investment is a major lever for developing sustainable growth, and we had to change a very large number of rules and regulations. It was not only a problem of resources, but was also a problem of mechanism, authorization, procedures, etc. And we have practically redesigned the way. That will be completed in the next months. Labor regulation, you already mentioned it. We will certainly introduce a number of things in the court system, in the way court will work. We have already introduced a new court, the enterprise court, to make the management of legal problems for enterprises more easy. The bankruptcy law has been renewed. We have introduced a very important measure in the last decree to make the civil procedures shorter. One of the main problems in our country is the length of the civil legal procedures. And through a filter in the appeal cases, we can really affect very positively the duration of the processes.
Minister, you ran one of Italy's biggest banks for nearly a decade. How concerned are you that banks in Italy are having difficulty finding funding, that they are unable to raise enough capital and may in fact have to have some recourse to a rescue, as we've seen in Spain?
Italian banks are real economy banks. We decided to stick to the basic rules of commercial banking, and thanks to this decision, we have gone through both crises without asking for any money to government or to anybody. Obviously, a bank that is very tied with the real economy suffers from the way the real economy works. So you will see the amount of bad credit cost quite high for a number of years, but it's absolutely sustainable. Obviously, the Italian banks suffer from what Italy as a whole is suffering from.
How do you break that link between the sovereign, the sovereign debt, the interest charged on Italian debt, and the funding costs for banks?
Okay, the decision by the BCE to provide enough liquidity, not only short term, but also medium term, was a very wise one. It was the right decision at the right moment, and Mario Draghi was very effective in providing European banking system the liquidity needed for going through this phase of the crisis. And in fact, while I was saying Europe is going in the right direction, we now have the good rules, the fiscal compact. We have a central bank that is behaving as a central bank to provide liquidity to banks. Now we have to work on the third step, the political commitment to collectively manage the crisis situations. And we're moving in that direction. If we provide this framework, then the effort in terms of growth can become really effective. And I see quite a wide front of countries pushing in that direction.
What happens, though? Do we need that political union before you can have mutualization of European debt, or which comes first?
No, we have to work on everything at the same time. Luckily enough, and probably tomorrow in Rome, we will have the evidence of it, the number of countries that are taking formal commitments to foster a new phase of growth through infrastructure projects, through innovation, through pushing the single market, because the same way we have done in our country, opening markets, creating competitiveness is the best way to create growth. And you asked me about the reforms we introduced. We opened markets that were traditionally closed and almost impossible to tackle. The gas industry, the local transportation industry, a major one, the professional service industry.
Let's just get back to the European question.
Yes.
One of the subjects which is up for discussion at the moment, it's banking union, it's the European Central Bank's potential role as a banking supervisor. Do you support the idea that the ECB should become the European-wide supervisor? Should it be for all banks or just the biggest banks?
Okay, I support the single market also in the banking world. Today we have 27 different markets with different rules, different supervisors, and this is a strategic weakness by Europe vis-à-vis the rest of the world. If we want to have only local champions without the synergies coming from real European banks, we lose an opportunity to play other roles. So single market is the direction. If you want to have a single market, you have to have a single rule book, and we're not there, and we have to push there. The day we have the single rule book, we can have, and we should have, a single supervisory body, maybe at the beginning for the European banks, for the larger banks, but at the end, regulation should be very similar.
Should that single supervisory body be able to deploy funds directly for the recapitalization of banks?
That is a decision we can take if we bring at the European level some funds or a part of the budget for that. It's not necessarily the case. Today, the commitments in that direction come from the different countries because the supervision is there and the banks are there. But why not considering also that possibility? Why not considering a European fund to guarantee deposits for these banks that are centrally controlled by the single...
How urgent is it to set this mechanism up?
It is urgent, but it's not kind of next month kind of decision.
One of the, or a couple of the ideas that have been proposed by Herman Van Rompuy is one is the idea of introducing Euro bills. What do you think of that proposal?
That's the third phase I mentioned before. If we accept that we are a union, and we are a union, especially at the Eurozone level, and we have common rules that guarantee all the countries in terms of public accounts discipline. If we have a central bank, then the third phase is exactly what you're mentioning. And the way to go in the direction of a collective responsibility in terms of public debts can be a wise use of Eurobonds. That can be a gradual effort that can go through test phases, but the Eurobond concept, if we are serious about the building of the European Union, cannot be excluded from the table.
Minister, yesterday Silvio Berlusconi, the former Prime Minister, said that the idea of leaving the euro shouldn't be blasphemy, in fact that it could help Italy's exports without harming the domestic economy. He's heading one of the parties which is backing this government. How helpful is this commentary?
Not helpful at all. It's a proposal that has nothing to do with common sense. And I'm totally against, and we are totally against any hypothesis of Italy leaving the euro. Euro is our currency, will remain the currency of Europe, is a strong currency, and we should not convey any kind of message against this certainty of ours.
You've mentioned that it's going to take some time to put into place all the building blocks to put the architecture underneath the euro, something that could take certainly longer than this government is going to be around. If there is an election next year and a coalition forms and you're invited to form that government, would you join the government again?
It's a question I don't accept, because today I have to take care of my of the engagement and commitment I take, and this technical government has to be very technical without any kind of electoral perspective.
So
but it's important.
But you don't envisage that there would be a need for a further extension of this technical government, given the difficult road that has to be passed over the next year or two?
The Italian people will decide. I think that what we are doing in order to get all the results coming from what we are doing, it needs a longer period. But again, in democracy, people will decide.
Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.